My sister Emma always said I had the cutest baby photos. Round cheeks, bright eyes, that innocent smile that could melt anyone's heart. What I didn't know was that she'd been using them to melt hearts on dating apps, pretending to be a single mom looking for love. The day I found out, everything I thought I knew about family loyalty died. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Ashley, and I'm 26 years old, living in a cramped studio apartment in Millbrook that smells like the pizza place downstairs. I work at Henderson Marketing Firm, the same company where my sister Emma climbs the corporate ladder in her designer heels while I answer phones in the lobby. We've always been different. Emma is 3 years older, the golden child who never put a foot wrong, while I've been the messy one. The one who asks too many questions and laughs too loud at family dinners. Growing up, our differences felt normal. Emma was the responsible one who did her homework early and kept her room spotless. I was the dreamer who collected vintage cameras and spent weekends at flea markets hunting for forgotten treasures. Mom always said we balanced each other out, but looking back, I think Emma saw our differences as competition she had to win. The discovery happened on a Tuesday morning that started like any other. I was grabbing coffee at the Daily Grind before work when my phone buzzed with a message from my best friend Sarah. She worked as a server at Murphy's Bar and Grill, and her text made my blood run cold. "Ashley, you need to see this. Meet me at lunch. Bring tissues." I spent the entire morning distracted, watching the clock crawl toward noon. Sarah's messages were never dramatic unless something was seriously wrong. When lunch finally arrived, I practically ran to the restaurant, finding Sarah in our usual corner booth with her phone face down on the table and her expression grim. "I don't know how to tell you this," she began, sliding her phone across to me. "Ryan, that guy I've been seeing, he showed me this dating profile last night. Said he thought it was weird because the girl looked familiar." I picked up the phone, and my world tilted sideways. There, on the screen, was a dating profile for someone named Emma_singlemom27. The main photo was unmistakably one of my baby pictures, the one where I'm sitting in a high chair with mashed carrots smeared across my chubby cheeks, grinning at the camera with pure joy. But this profile claimed the baby was Emma's daughter, and Emma was a devoted single mother looking for a man who could handle a ready-made family. My hands started shaking as I scrolled through the other photos. More of my baby pictures, each one accompanied by captions about Emma's journey as a young mother, her struggles, her hopes for finding someone who would love both her and her beautiful daughter. The bio talked about sleepless nights, first steps, the joy and challenges of raising a child alone. It was elaborate, detailed, and completely fabricated. "This is sick," I whispered, staring at a photo of me as a toddler in a sandbox, now being used to catfish innocent men into thinking Emma was a single mother. "How long has this been up?" Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Ryan said he's been seeing this profile for months. Ashley, there's more. He showed some of his friends, and they've all seen it too. She's been messaging guys, going on dates, using your childhood as her backstory." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just identity theft, it was something deeper and more twisted. Emma had taken the most innocent parts of my life, my actual childhood, and weaponized them for her dating life. She'd turned my baby photos into bait for sympathy and attention, creating an entire false narrative about motherhood and struggle that she'd never experienced. I spent the rest of lunch scrolling through the profile, each detail making me sicker. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Emma had crafted stories about my first words, my favorite foods as a baby, even my childhood accidents, all reframed as memories of her daughter. She'd taken my life and made it her prop. That afternoon, I could barely focus on work. Every time the phone rang at the reception desk, I jumped. Emma's office was 3 floors up, and I kept imagining her up there, probably planning her next date with some unsuspecting guy who thought he was meeting a devoted single mother. The thought of her sitting across from strangers, showing them my baby photos and spinning tales about bedtime stories and diaper changes, made my stomach churn. When my shift ended, I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to Riverside Apartments, where Emma lived in a sleek 2-bedroom unit that cost more than I made in 3 months. I needed to confront her, to understand how she could violate my privacy and childhood memories so casually. But when I knocked on her door, she wasn't home. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 2 hours, watching for her silver BMW. When she finally pulled in, perfectly put together in her work clothes, I felt a surge of anger so intense it scared me. This was the woman who'd held me when I cried over my first breakup, who'd taught me how to do my makeup for prom, who'd been my maid of honor at my college graduation party. How could she do this to me? Emma seemed genuinely surprised to see me as she walked toward her building. "Ashley, what are you doing here? Is everything okay?" I held up Sarah's phone, the dating profile still glowing on the screen. "We need to talk." Her face went white, then red, then settled into something I'd never seen before, a cold calculation that made her look like a stranger. She glanced around the parking lot, checking if anyone was watching, then gestured toward her apartment. "Come upstairs," she said quietly. "Let's discuss this privately." Her apartment was as immaculate as always, all white furniture and carefully placed decorative objects that looked like they belonged in a magazine. Emma poured herself a glass of wine without offering me one, which told me everything I needed to know about how this conversation was going to go. "So you found it," she said, settling into her pristine white armchair like she was hosting a business meeting. I was wondering when someone would connect the dots. Her casual tone stunned me. "Emma, you've been using my baby photos to catfish men online. You've been pretending I'm your daughter. How is that not completely insane to you?" She sipped her wine and shrugged. "You're being dramatic. They're just old photos. It's not like you were using them for anything important. They're my childhood memories. And now they're helping me find someone who wants a family," she replied coolly. "Dating is brutal out there, Ashley. Men want women who are nurturing, who have maternal instincts. The photos show that side of me." I stared at her, searching for any sign of remorse or recognition of how wrong this was. "But they're not showing that side of you. They're showing me as a baby, and you're lying about being a mother." Emma set down her wine glass and looked at me like I was being unreasonably difficult. "The men I'm meeting don't need to know the technical details. They're getting to see the real me, the woman who would be an amazing mother someday. Your baby photos just help them visualize that future." "The real you? Emma, you're catfishing people. You're creating an entire false identity based on lies about having a child." "I prefer to think of it as aspirational dating," she said, and I realized she actually believed her own twisted logic. "I'm showing them the woman I'm going to become. Besides, you were an adorable baby. I'm doing those photos justice." The audacity of her statement left me speechless. She wasn't just stealing my identity. She was convinced she was doing me a favor. Emma stood up and walked to her kitchen, refilling her wine glass like this was a normal sister chat about weekend plans. "Look, Ashley, I understand you're upset, but this really isn't that big of a deal. I've been careful about it. I only use the photos where you can't really tell who it is anyway." Sarah's boyfriend recognized me immediately. Emma paused, wine glass halfway to her lips. "Really? That's unfortunate. I'll have to be more selective." She wasn't planning to stop. She was planning to be more careful about not getting caught. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not just anger, but genuine grief. This was my sister, the person who was supposed to protect me, and she was treating my violation like a minor inconvenience in her dating strategy. "Take down the profile, Emma. Delete it tonight." She turned to face me fully, and for the first time since I'd arrived, I saw a flash of the sister I remembered, but it was quickly replaced by something harder, more calculated. "I can't do that, Ashley. I've been building relationships with these men for months. Some of them are really promising. There's this one guy, Marcus, who's been talking about meeting my daughter. He's everything I've been looking for. Your imaginary daughter. Me, as a baby, 26 years ago." "Details," she waved her hand dismissively. "The important thing is that we're connecting on a deep level. He wants to be a father figure." I realized then that Emma wasn't just lying to these men, she was lying to herself. She'd created this elaborate fantasy where she was a devoted single mother, and she'd convinced herself it was real. The scary part was how easily she'd incorporated my entire childhood into her delusion. "What happens when Marcus wants to meet your daughter?" I asked. "What happens when any of these guys want to meet the child you're supposedly raising?" Emma smiled, and it was the most chilling expression I'd ever seen on her face. "That's where you come in, little sister. You're going to help me." The room felt like all the air had been sucked out of it. "What do you mean?" "You can play along when I need you to, just for important meetings. You're good with kids. You could easily pretend to be my daughter for a few hours when necessary." I stood up so fast I knocked over the coffee table magazine stack. "Are you completely out of your mind? You want me to pretend to be your child so you can continue catfishing men with my baby photos? It would just be temporary, until I find the right guy and we get serious. Then I can gradually transition the story, maybe say my daughter went to live with her father or something." Emma was describing an elaborate long-term con, and she wanted me to be her accomplice. She'd taken my identity, my childhood, and now she wanted my active participation in deceiving innocent people who were genuinely looking for love and family. "No," I said, grabbing my purse. "Absolutely not. Delete the profile, Emma, or I'll report it myself." Her expression turned cold again. "You wouldn't. Think about what that would do to my reputation at work. Think about how it would affect Mom when she finds out her daughters are fighting over something this petty." "Petty?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You've stolen my identity, and you're calling it petty?" "I'm calling it family," she said firmly. "We're supposed to help each other. You have hundreds of baby photos sitting in albums doing nothing. I'm putting them to good use." I headed toward the door, but Emma's voice stopped me. "Ashley, wait. Let me show you something that might change your perspective." Against my better judgment, I turned around. Emma walked to her laptop and opened it, navigating to what looked like a social media page. "Look at this," she said, turning the screen toward me. It was a blog post titled, "My Journey as a Single Mom: Finding Love When You're Not Just Dating for Yourself." The post was accompanied by several of my baby photos, and it had hundreds of likes and comments from women sharing their own stories about dating as mothers. "I've been helping people, Ashley. Women who are actually single mothers have been reaching out to me, thanking me for giving them hope. I've accidentally created a support community." I scanned the comments and saw genuine emotion from women who were struggling with real challenges of single parenthood. They were finding comfort in Emma's fake story, connecting with what they thought was her authentic experience. "These women are pouring their hearts out to you based on lies," I said. "You're not helping them, you're manipulating them." "I'm inspiring them," Emma corrected. "Sometimes people need to see success stories to believe their own dreams are possible." I realized that Emma had convinced herself she was some kind of inspiration blogger, that her catfishing had accidentally stumbled into something positive. But it was still built on a foundation of lies and stolen identity. "Delete it all, Emma. The dating profile, the blog, everything. These women deserve real support from actual single mothers, not fantasy stories built on my childhood photos." Emma closed the laptop and looked at me with what I could only describe as pity. "You're not seeing the bigger picture, Ashley. This has grown beyond just dating. I'm building something important here. You're building a house of cards with my face as the foundation. And it's a beautiful house," she said simply. I left her apartment that night knowing that my sister was not going to stop voluntarily. Emma had created an entire alternate identity around my childhood, and she was too invested in the fantasy to give it up easily. As I drove home through the quiet Millbrook streets, I realized that the Emma I'd grown up with, the sister who'd braided my hair and defended me from neighborhood bullies, was gone. In her place was someone I didn't recognize, someone who could steal my most innocent memories and call it inspiration. The next few days passed in a haze of disbelief and growing anger. I couldn't stop thinking about the men Emma was deceiving, the women she was misleading with her fake motherhood blog, and the casual way she'd dismissed my feelings about the whole situation. Every time my phone buzzed, I half expected it to be Emma with an apology, or at least some acknowledgement of how wrong she'd been. Instead, I got silence. Sarah checked in on me daily, bringing coffee and listening to me process the betrayal. I keep thinking about all those family dinners where she seemed so normal, I told her over lunch at the daily grind. How long has she been capable of something like this? Maybe she's always been capable, Sarah said gently. Maybe you just never had reason to see it before. That possibility terrified me more than anything else. Had I been blind to Emma's true nature my entire life? Looking back, I could remember moments of casual cruelty disguised as big sister wisdom, times when she'd taken credit for my ideas or minimized my achievements. But this felt different, more calculated and deeply personal. On Friday evening, I was microwaving leftover takeout in my tiny apartment when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize with a local area code. Ashley? The voice was male, hesitant, probably around my age. My name is Marcus. I think we need to talk about your sister Emma. My heart stopped. Marcus, the guy Emma had mentioned, the one she said wanted to meet her daughter. Me, apparently. How did you get my number? I managed to ask, sinking onto my couch. It took some detective work, Marcus said, and I could hear traffic in the background like he was calling from his car. Emma gave me her real name eventually, and I found her on LinkedIn. From there, I found your mom's Facebook, and then yours. You work at Henderson Marketing, right? I called the main line and said I was your cousin trying to reach you about a family emergency. The fact that he'd tracked me down through multiple social media platforms should have scared me, but instead I felt oddly relieved. Here was someone else who'd been lied to. Someone who might actually understand what Emma had done. Marcus, I need you to know that everything Emma told you about having a daughter is completely false. Those photos she's been showing you are of me when I was a baby, not her child. There was a long pause, and I heard him take a deep breath. Yeah, I figured that out. That's why I'm calling. Ashley, this goes way deeper than just fake photos on a dating app. What do you mean? Can we meet somewhere? This isn't really a phone conversation. There are things you need to see, things Emma's been doing that you probably don't know about yet. An hour later, I was sitting across from Marcus at a quiet corner table in Murphy's Bar and Grill, the same place where Sarah had first shown me Emma's dating profile. Marcus was different from what I'd expected. Tall, brown hair, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, the type of guy who looked like he volunteered at animal shelters and remembered birthdays. Exactly the kind of decent man Emma would target for her scheme. I want to start by saying I'm sorry, Marcus said, sliding a manila folder across the table. I should have figured this out sooner, but Emma is incredibly convincing. She had answers for everything. I opened the folder and immediately felt sick. Inside were printed screenshots of text conversations between Marcus and Emma, spanning months. But these weren't just casual dating conversations. Emma had created an intricate web of lies about her life as a single mother, complete with detailed stories about sleepless nights, doctor appointments, and playground adventures that had never happened. Look at the timestamps, Marcus said, pointing to a conversation from 3 weeks ago. She was texting me at 2 a.m, saying she'd been up all night with her sick daughter. She sent me photos of medicine bottles and a thermometer reading. I stared at the screenshots. Emma had gone to elaborate lengths to create evidence for her lies, staging photos of children's medicine and even what looked like a messy living room that she claimed was the aftermath of caring for a sick child. This is insane, I whispered, flipping through more pages. She's been living an entire fake life with you. It gets worse, Marcus said grimly. Keep reading. The next set of screenshots showed Emma asking Marcus for money. Small amounts at first, $20 for emergency diapers, when she'd supposedly forgotten her wallet. $50 when her daughter needed school supplies. But the requests had gotten bigger. $200 for a car repair when she needed reliable transportation for her child. $300 for a security deposit on a new apartment in a better school district. You gave her money? I asked, though the bank transfer confirmations in the folder already answered my question. Over $1,500 in the past 2 months, Marcus said, running his hands through his hair. Ashley, she had me completely convinced. She would call me crying about how hard it was to make ends meet as a single mom, how she was trying to give her daughter the best life possible, but everything was so expensive. She even sent me a photo of an eviction notice. I felt like I was drowning. This wasn't just identity theft anymore, it was fraud. Emma had been using my baby photos and fabricated stories about my childhood to financially manipulate a man who genuinely cared about children and wanted to help. The eviction notice was fake too, I asked, though I already knew the answer. Had to be. I drove past her apartment complex yesterday after I started getting suspicious. It's one of the nicest places in Millbrook. The rent there is probably 3 times what she told me she was paying. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed me more screenshots, these from Emma's fake mommy blog that I'd seen at her apartment. She's been using the same photos and stories across multiple platforms. The blog, the dating app, even a GoFundMe page I found yesterday. A GoFundMe? For her daughter's medical expenses. Something about needing money for therapy after a traumatic incident at daycare. It's raised almost $2,000 from strangers who think they're helping a struggling single mother. I put my head in my hands. Emma hadn't just violated my privacy and childhood memories, she'd turned them into a business. She was profiting off my baby photos and making up elaborate sob stories about fictional trauma I'd supposedly experienced as a child. How did you figure it out? I asked. Marcus smiled sadly. I'm a pediatric nurse at Millbrook General. When Emma started getting really specific about her daughter's medical issues, things stopped adding up. She claimed her 3-year-old had been diagnosed with ADHD and was on medication, but the symptoms she described didn't match, and the medication names she mentioned aren't even prescribed for children that young. So you investigated. I started asking more detailed questions about her daughter's daily routine, her favorite foods, her developmental milestones. Emma's answers were inconsistent. Sometimes she'd say her daughter was potty trained, other times she'd mention buying diapers. She told me her daughter's favorite book was one that wasn't even published until last year, but claimed she'd been reading it to her since she was born. I thought about all the detailed stories Emma had fabricated using my actual childhood. She'd taken real events from when I was little, but she didn't know them well enough to keep her lies straight when someone with medical training started asking specific questions. The final straw was when she invited me to her daughter's birthday party, Marcus continued. She said it was going to be small, just family. But she wanted me to meet her little girl officially. I was excited, nervous. You know? I'd been talking to this child through Emma for months, hearing stories about her personality, her quirks. I bought presents, planned games. Then the day of the party, Emma canceled at the last minute. Said her daughter had come down with the flu. But you didn't believe her. I called the pediatric unit at the hospital to see if we'd had any flu cases that week. We hadn't. It's the middle of summer, Ashley. Kids don't typically get the flu in July. That's when I started really digging into Emma's story. And it all fell apart. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small wrapped gift. I bought this for your 3rd birthday party that never happened. It's a stuffed elephant. Emma told me her daughter loved elephants because you went to the zoo when she was little and spent an hour watching them play in the water. I stared at the gift, my throat tight with emotion. That actually happened. When I was 3, we went to the Lincoln Park Zoo, and I was fascinated by the elephants. I have photos of that day somewhere. Emma probably has those photos too, Marcus said quietly. She's been building her lies around your real memories, Ashley. She's taken your entire childhood and turned it into her fictional daughter's life story. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Emma hadn't just stolen random baby photos, she'd systematically mined my childhood for content. Every story she told about her fake daughter was probably based on something that had actually happened to me. My first steps, my favorite toys, my childhood fears and joys, all of it had been repackaged and sold to strangers as Emma's motherhood experience. There's something else, Marcus said, his voice getting quieter. Emma's been talking about introducing me to her family. She wants me to meet her parents, her sister. She's been building up to some kind of big family dinner where I'd meet everyone, including her daughter. She wanted you to meet me, not as Ashley, her sister. As the little girl from the photos, all grown up. I think she was planning to ask you to pretend to be her daughter, who'd aged out of the cute baby phase. Maybe introduce you as her adopted teenager or something. The audacity of Emma's plan left me speechless. She'd been grooming Marcus for months, building an emotional connection based on lies, taking his money and planning to eventually manipulate me into participating in her deception. She'd mapped out a long-term con that would have required my active participation in fooling a man who genuinely cared about children and family. Marcus, I am so sorry she did this to you. You seem like a really good person, and you didn't deserve to be lied to and manipulated like this. I appreciate that, but I'm not the victim here, Ashley. You are. She stole your identity, your childhood memories, and she's been profiting off them for months. The money I gave her is nothing compared to what she's taken from you. We sat in silence for a few minutes, both processing the scope of Emma's deception. The bar around us was filling up with the typical Friday night crowd, people laughing and enjoying normal relationships built on honesty and trust. It felt surreal to be sitting there discussing my sister's elaborate fraud scheme. "What are you going to do?" Marcus asked finally. "I don't know." When I confronted her earlier this week, she acted like it was no big deal. She actually wanted me to help her continue the lie with you and other guys she's been talking to. Marcus's eyes widened. "There are others?" I nodded. "The dating profile is still active. She's probably got multiple conversations going with different men, using the same photos and stories about me." "Ashley, you have to report this. This isn't just personal anymore, it's criminal fraud. She's taken money from people under false pretenses, she's running fake charity fundraisers. The GoFundMe alone could get her charged with wire fraud." "She's my sister," I said weakly, though the words felt hollow. "My mom would be devastated if Emma got arrested." "Your sister is a predator," Marcus said firmly. "She's targeting good people who want to help children and families, and she's stealing from them. How many other guys like me are out there right now, sending her money they think is going to help a struggling child?" The weight of that question settled over me. Emma wasn't just hurting me anymore, she was hurting innocent people who were trying to do good in the world. Men who wanted to be father figures, women who were supporting what they thought was a fellow single mother, donors who believed they were helping with a child's medical expenses. All of them were being deceived and financially exploited. "I have screenshots of everything," Marcus continued. "Bank transfers, text conversations, the fake medical information she gave me. If you're willing to file a police report about the identity theft, I'll provide evidence of the financial fraud." "You'd really do that?" "Ashley, in my job I see what real single mothers go through every day. I see kids who actually need medical help, families who are genuinely struggling to make ends meet. Emma is stealing from all of them every time someone donates to her fake causes instead of real ones. She's not just hurting the people she's directly lying to, she's taking resources away from children and families who actually need help." Marcus was right, and I knew it. But the thought of sending my own sister to jail felt impossible. Despite everything she'd done, she was still the person who'd taught me to ride a bike and helped me with algebra homework. How do you report someone to the police when you've shared Christmas mornings with them for 26 years? "Can I think about it?" I asked. "Of course. But Ashley, while you're thinking, she's still out there taking advantage of people. Every day you wait is another day she might be manipulating someone else." Marcus left me with his contact information and copies of all the evidence he'd gathered. As I drove home that night, I couldn't stop thinking about the stuffed elephant he'd bought for my fake third birthday party. Some man I'd never met had gone to a toy store and carefully selected a gift for a child who didn't exist, based on a story about elephants that had actually happened to me 23 years ago. When I got back to my apartment, I dug through my closet until I found my old photo albums. There it was, the picture from the zoo when I was 3, standing in front of the elephant enclosure with my tiny hands pressed against the glass, eyes wide with wonder. Emma had taken that moment, that pure childhood joy, and turned it into a prop for financial manipulation. I spent the weekend going through my photo albums, trying to identify which memories Emma had stolen. The birthday party where I'd gotten chocolate cake all over my face, now part of her fake daughter's first birthday celebration. The Halloween where I'd dressed as a princess, repurposed for Emma's blog post about my daughter's first costume. The family vacation to the beach where I'd built sandcastles, transformed into a story about a struggling single mom saving up all year to give her daughter one special day by the ocean. Every photo, every memory had been commodified and sold. Emma had taken the story of my life and rewritten it as her fictional motherhood journey, complete with struggles and triumphs that belonged to our family, not her imaginary single-parent narrative. By Sunday evening, I had made my decision. I called Marcus and told him I was ready to file a police report. But first, I needed to do something else. I needed to confront Emma one more time, not to give her another chance to explain or apologize, but to tell her exactly what she'd cost me and why I was turning her in. Monday morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Emma's apartment. Her BMW was in its usual spot, which meant she was probably getting ready for work. I sat in my car for a few minutes, rehearsing what I wanted to say, trying to prepare myself for another round of her manipulation and gaslighting. When Emma opened her door, she looked surprised but not particularly concerned. She was dressed for work in a navy blue blazer and pencil skirt, her hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless. She looked like the successful businesswoman she was, not like someone who'd been running elaborate fraud schemes in her spare time. "Ashley, this is unexpected. Is everything okay?" "I met Marcus," I said, pushing past her into the apartment. Emma's composure slipped for just a moment before she recovered. "Oh, Marcus. I was wondering when that might happen." "You were wondering?" I turned to face her. "Emma, you've been taking money from him for months. You've been lying about having a sick child, asking for donations for fake medical expenses. This isn't just about dating anymore." Emma poured herself coffee from her expensive espresso machine, taking her time to add cream and sugar. "Marcus is a sweet man, very generous. I'm sure he told you all sorts of dramatic stories about how I've wronged him. He showed me bank transfers, Emma. $1,500 for a daughter who doesn't exist. I never forced him to give me anything," Emma said calmly. "He offered to help and I accepted. That's what people do in relationships." "Relationships built on lies." Emma sipped her coffee and looked at me with that same pitying expression she'd worn during our last conversation. "Ashley, you're getting worked up over nothing again. Marcus and I have a connection. The details of how that connection developed aren't really anyone else's business." I stared at my sister, searching for any sign of the person I'd grown up with. "Do you even hear yourself? You've committed fraud, Emma. You're raising money online for fake medical expenses. You've stolen my identity to catfish multiple men. This isn't a relationship. It's a criminal enterprise." "That's a bit dramatic, don't you think?" Emma walked to her laptop and opened it. "Look, I'll show you something that might give you some perspective on what I've actually accomplished here." She turned the screen toward me, and I saw her fake mommy blog had grown significantly since I'd last seen it. The follower count had increased by thousands, and the latest post had hundreds of comments and shares. "I'm reaching people, Ashley. Real women who are struggling with single motherhood, who need inspiration and community. This blog has become something bigger than I ever imagined. Based on lies about my childhood, based on universal experiences of motherhood and struggle that resonate with people. The specific details don't matter as much as the emotional truth I'm sharing." Emma clicked through to the comments section, highlighting messages from women thanking her for her honesty, for sharing her journey, for making them feel less alone in their struggles. She'd created a community of actual single mothers who were finding comfort in her fabricated stories about raising me. "These women trust you," I said, reading over their heartfelt comments. "They're sharing their real struggles with someone who's lying about everything." "I'm giving them hope," Emma replied. "Sometimes people need to see success stories to believe their own dreams are possible. I'm showing them that single motherhood doesn't have to mean giving up on love or happiness." "You're not a single mother, Emma. You've never changed a diaper, or stayed up all night with a sick child, or worried about paying for daycare. You're selling them a fantasy. I'm selling them inspiration. There's a difference." I realized then that Emma had convinced herself she was performing some kind of public service, that her lies were justified by the positive response she was getting from her fake blog. She'd rationalized the fraud as philanthropy, turned criminal deception into a mission of hope. "What about the GoFundMe, Emma? What about the money people are donating for fake medical expenses?" For the first time, Emma looked slightly uncomfortable. "That got more attention than I expected." I was planning to donate the money to a real children's charity eventually. Eventually? When? After you've raised enough to buy yourself a new car? I haven't touched that money, Emma said defensively. It's sitting in a separate account. Show me. Emma hesitated, then clicked over to what looked like a banking website. The GoFundMe account showed a balance of just over $1,800, all donated by strangers who thought they were helping with a child's therapy costs after a traumatic daycare incident that had never happened. See? I haven't spent any of it. Yet, I said. But you've been spending Marcus's money, and probably money from other guys you're talking to. That's different. That's relationship money. Gifts between people who care about each other. People who care about each other don't lie about having children, Emma. We stood there in her pristine living room, the laptop screen glowing between us, and I saw the future Emma had planned. She would continue building her fake empire, expanding her blog audience, taking money from well-meaning men, raising funds for fictional causes. She would keep using my photos and memories as raw material for her fabricated life, growing bolder as she got away with it. I'm turning you in, I said quietly. Emma's coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. What? I'm filing a police report today. Identity theft, wire fraud, whatever charges they think will stick. Marcus is going to provide evidence of the financial fraud, and I'm going to document the identity theft. Ashley, you can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Emma set down her coffee and walked over to me, reaching out like she was going to take my hands. I stepped back. Think about what this would do to our family, she said, her voice taking on a pleading tone I'd never heard before. Think about Mom. This would destroy her. Her eldest daughter arrested for fraud? She's already dealing with Dad's health problems. This kind of stress could literally kill her. I felt a familiar stab of guilt, the same manipulation Emma had used on me my entire life. Make me responsible for other people's feelings. Make me the bad guy for setting boundaries or expecting decent treatment. You should have thought about Mom before you started committing crimes using my face. I'm your sister, Ashley. We're supposed to protect each other. You're supposed to protect me, I said, surprised by the anger in my own voice. You're the older sister. You were supposed to look out for me, not steal my identity for profit. Emma's expression shifted again, back to that cold calculation I'd seen before. If you report me, I'll make sure everyone knows you were in on it. I'll tell them you helped me set up the profiles, that you were part of the scam from the beginning. No one will believe that, won't they? Your photos, your childhood stories, your memories. How could I have gotten such detailed information without your help? I'll say you got cold feet when we started making real money, that you're trying to frame me to avoid getting in trouble. Yourself. I stared at my sister, this woman who'd helped raise me, who'd been my maid of honor and my confidant, and realized she was threatening to destroy my reputation and possibly my freedom to protect herself. She was willing to send me to jail for crimes she'd committed. You would really do that to me? I would really do whatever it takes to protect what I've built, Emma said simply. This blog, these relationships, this community I've created, it's bigger than just us now. I have responsibilities to the women who follow me, to the men who trust me. I can't let you destroy that because you're having some kind of jealousy crisis about baby photos. The word jealousy hit me like a slap. Even now, even caught red-handed in multiple felonies, Emma was trying to reframe this as my problem, my emotional failing, my inability to be happy for her success. I'm leaving now, I said, walking toward the door. I'm going to the police station, and I'm filing a report. What you do after that is up to you, but Emma, this ends today. Ashley, wait. Her voice cracked, and for a second she sounded like the sister I remembered. Please, can't we work something out? I'll pay you for the use of the photos. I'll cut you in on the blog revenue. We can be partners in this. I turned back one last time. You still don't get it, do you? This was never about money. This was about you stealing my childhood and using it for your own gain, without asking, without caring how it affected me. You took my most innocent memories and turned them into props for manipulation and fraud. But we could be successful together, Emma pressed. You could help me expand the blog, Maybe write some guest posts about growing up. We could build something amazing. She was still trying to recruit me into her scam, still convinced that if she just found the right angle, the right incentive, I would join her criminal enterprise instead of stopping it. Goodbye, Emma. I walked out of her apartment and didn't look back. The Millbrook police station smelled like burned coffee and industrial disinfectant. I sat in the waiting area clutching Marcus's folder of evidence, watching officers come and go through glass doors that required key cards to open. Every few minutes, I questioned whether I was doing the right thing. Emma was still my sister, still the person who'd braided my hair for picture day and let me sleep in her bed during thunderstorms. But then I'd remember the cold way she'd threatened to frame me, and my resolve would harden again. Detective Sarah Chen called my name after what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put me at ease. Her office was small but organized, with family photos on her desk and diplomas on the wall that told me she specialized in financial crimes and identity theft. "So you want to report identity theft involving your sister," Detective Chen said, settling behind her desk with a notepad. "Tell me what's been happening." I started with finding Emma's dating profile and watching Detective Chen's expression shift from polite interest to genuine concern as I explained the scope of the deception. When I mentioned the fake medical fundraising and the money Emma had taken from Marcus, the detective started taking more detailed notes. "You said she's raised money through a GoFundMe for fake medical expenses. Do you have documentation of that?" I pulled out my phone and navigated to the fundraising page Emma had created. Here it is. She's claiming the money is for therapy costs after my supposed traumatic daycare experience. The incident she's describing never happened, and I was never in therapy as a child. Detective Chen studied the page, scrolling through the heartfelt comments from donors and the detailed story Emma had crafted about a 3-year-old's psychological recovery. "This is sophisticated," she said finally. "Your sister has created multiple interconnected platforms all supporting the same false narrative. The dating profile leads to the blog. The blog mentions the medical issues. The medical issues justify the fundraising. It's a comprehensive fraud ecosystem." Is that good or bad for prosecuting her? It's good for showing intent and premeditation, bad for your sister. This isn't a spur-of-the-moment decision or a small lie that got out of hand. This is organized, ongoing criminal enterprise. Detective Chen asked me to walk through Emma's apartment visit, including her threats to implicate me as an accomplice. The detective's expression grew darker as I described Emma's attempts to recruit me into the scheme and her casual dismissal of the harm she was causing. "She actually asked you to pretend to be her daughter for dates?" She wanted me to play along when she introduced men to her family. She was planning some elaborate long-term deception, where I would gradually age out of being her cute toddler into being her adopted teenager or something equally bizarre. "That would have made you an unwilling accessory to her fraud," Detective Chen said grimly. "Your sister was planning to involve you in criminal activity without your consent. That's another charge we can add to the list." The detective explained that Emma's crimes fell into several categories. The identity theft was obvious, using my photos and personal information without permission. The wire fraud came from using electronic communications to solicit money under false pretenses. The charity fraud was a separate issue that could involve federal charges if the money crossed state lines. Each platform Emma had created, each story she'd told, each dollar she'd received, added to the potential charges. "What happens next?" I asked. "First, we'll need a formal statement from you documenting exactly what photos and information your sister used without permission. Then we'll need copies of all the fake profiles and fundraising pages before she has a chance to delete them. After that, we'll contact this Marcus person and get his evidence of the financial fraud." Detective Chen handed me a business card and a thick packet of forms. "I want you to go home and document everything you can remember about your sister's deceptions. Print out screenshots of all her fake profiles. Write down every story she told that was based on your childhood. List any other people who might have been deceived. The more evidence we have, the stronger the case." As I left the police station, I felt a strange mixture of relief and nausea. I'd crossed a line I could never uncross. By tomorrow, Emma would probably know I'd filed a police report, and our relationship would be permanently destroyed. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was taking control of the situation instead of being a victim of it. I spent the rest of the day at my apartment, methodically documenting Emma's fraud network. I printed screenshots of her dating profile, her blog posts, her GoFundMe page, and every comment thread I could find. I wrote detailed descriptions of which childhood photos she'd used, and how she'd twisted my real memories into her fictional motherhood stories. By evening, I had 3 binders full of evidence, organized chronologically to show how Emma's deceptions had evolved and expanded over time. Marcus called me around 8 o'clock. "How did it go with the police?" "Better than I expected. Detective Chen seems to really understand the scope of what Emma's been doing. She wants to meet with you tomorrow to get your evidence." "I've been thinking about this all day," Marcus said. "Ashley, I looked deeper into Emma's blog analytics. She's not just stealing from individuals anymore. She's got sponsorship deals with parenting companies, affiliate marketing agreements, even a book deal in the works." "A book deal?" "She's been negotiating with a small publisher to write a memoir about single motherhood. The working title is something like Raising Hope, a Single Mother's Journey to Love and Success. She's literally planning to publish a book based on lies about your childhood." The scope of Emma's ambitions staggered me. She wasn't content with small-scale fraud. She was building a media empire on stolen identity and fabricated experiences. The book deal meant she was planning to profit from my childhood memories on a massive scale, potentially reaching thousands of readers with her manufactured story. "There's more," Marcus continued. "I found Emma on other dating apps too. She's running the same scam with different men across multiple platforms. I created fake profiles and found her on 3 other sites, all using your photos, all telling the same stories about her daughter. How many men do you think she's deceiving? Based on what I can see from her social media activity and the frequency of her blog posts, I'd guess she's actively communicating with at least a dozen men, maybe more. And Ashley, some of these conversations go back almost a year. She's been doing this much longer than either of us realized." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Emma hadn't just recently started using my photos, she'd been systematically exploiting my identity for months, maybe longer. Every sweet text message I'd gotten from her over the past year, every sisterly phone call, every family dinner where she'd acted normal. She'd been living a double life as a fake single mother using my face. "I found something else that might interest you," Marcus said. "Emma's been attending single-parent support groups in person. There is a group that meets at the community center every Thursday night, and she's been going for months, telling the same stories about her daughter." "She's been lying to support groups?" "Those are for people who actually need help." "She's been taking up space and resources meant for real single parents, getting emotional support and probably practical advice based on completely false circumstances. Some of these people might have even given her money or other help thinking she was struggling." I thought about the women in those support groups, probably exhausted single mothers looking for community and understanding, welcoming Emma into their circle and sharing their real struggles with someone who was essentially performing an elaborate character study. Emma had infiltrated spaces meant for vulnerable people and exploited their kindness for her own entertainment and profit. "Marcus, can you document what you found about the other dating profiles and the support groups?" Detective Chen said the more evidence we have, the better. "Already on it. I've been screenshot everything and organizing it chronologically. Ashley, when this all comes out, it's gonna be big. Emma's touched so many people's lives with her lies. The fallout is going to be massive." After we hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment, trying to process the true scope of my sister's deception. This wasn't just about stolen baby photos anymore. It was about a comprehensive false identity that had infected multiple communities and platforms. Emma had created an alternate reality where she was a struggling single mother, and she'd been living in that reality so thoroughly that she'd forgotten it was built on lies. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from my mother. My stomach dropped as I realized Emma had probably told her about the police report, probably spinning it as me being jealous or vindictive, probably making herself the victim once again. "Ashley Marie, what in God's name is going on?" Mom's voice was shrill when I called her back. Emma called me crying last night, saying you've accused her of stealing your identity. She says you're trying to get her arrested over some old baby photos. Have you lost your mind? I closed my eyes and tried to stay calm. Mom, Emma's been using my baby photos to catfish men online. She's been pretending to be a single mother and taking money from people under false pretenses. This isn't about jealousy, it's about fraud. Fraud? Ashley, you're talking about your sister. Emma would never hurt anyone. She's always been the responsible one, the one who thinks things through. She's raised almost $2,000 through a fake charity claiming I needed therapy for trauma that never happened. She's been taking money from men she met online by pretending those photos are of her daughter. Mom, she's been lying to people for months. There was silence on the other end of the line, and I could hear Mom breathing heavily. Even if that's true, and I'm not saying it is, couldn't you work this out as a family? Did you really have to involve the police? I tried to work it out with her. She wanted me to help her continue the lies. She asked me to pretend to be her daughter when she introduced men to the family. You're exaggerating. I'm not, Mom. Emma's created an entire fake life based on my childhood, and she's profiting from it. She's hurt people who were trying to help what they thought was a struggling single mother. Mom was quiet for a long moment. What exactly did you tell the police? I explained my meeting with Detective Chen, being careful not to mention the book deal or the multiple dating profiles, since I wanted the police to discover those things through their own investigation. Mom listened without interrupting, and I could hear her getting more upset as I described the evidence I'd gathered. Ashley, do you understand what you've done? If Emma gets arrested, she'll lose her job. She could go to prison. This will destroy her entire life. She destroyed it herself, Mom. I'm just making sure she doesn't destroy anyone else's life in the process. She's your sister, Mom said, her voice breaking. Family is supposed to stick together no matter what. Family is also supposed to protect each other, not steal each other's identities for profit. Mom started crying then, the kind of deep, wrenching sobs that made me feel like the worst daughter in the world. How did it come to this? How did my girls end up hurting each other like this? I wanted to comfort her, to take back the police report and pretend Emma's crimes didn't matter if it would stop my mother's pain. But then I thought about Marcus, about the women in the support groups, about all the strangers who donated money thinking they were helping a child who didn't exist. Mom, I know this is hard, but Emma made choices that hurt innocent people. She can't just get away with it because she's family. Don't lecture me about family, Ashley. I raised you girls to take care of each other. You also raised us to be honest and kind to other people. Emma hasn't been either of those things. Mom hung up on me then, leaving me sitting in my kitchen with tears streaming down my face and the horrible certainty that I'd just destroyed our family. But as much as it hurt, I knew I'd made the right choice. Emma's victims deserved justice more than Emma deserved protection from the consequences of her own actions. Detective Chen called me around noon with an update. We've made contact with your sister. She's agreed to come in for questioning this afternoon with her attorney. She got a lawyer already? Smart move on her part. Ashley, I want to prepare you for what's likely to happen next. Your sister's lawyer is probably going to try to frame this as a family dispute rather than criminal fraud. They might argue that since the photos are of you and your family members, she had implied permission to use them, but I never gave permission. I know that, and we'll make sure that's clear in the record. But Emma's lawyer might also try to minimize the financial fraud by arguing that the money people gave her was voluntary, that she never explicitly forced anyone to pay her. What about the fake charity fundraising? That's our strongest case. Soliciting donations for fake medical expenses is textbook fraud. But Ashley, you should know that Emma might try to drag you into this as a willing participant. Her lawyer might claim you knew about the profiles and approved of them. I thought about Emma's threat to frame me as an accomplice. She already threatened to do that when I confronted her. Then we'll be ready for it. The timeline of events is on your side. You reported her immediately after discovering the fraud. You never benefited financially from her schemes, And you have witnesses who can testify that you were genuinely shocked and upset when you found out what she was doing. Detective Chen explained that the investigation would probably take several weeks as they traced Emma's various online accounts and financial transactions. In the meantime, I should expect Emma and her lawyer to contact me, possibly trying to negotiate some kind of settlement or convince me to drop the charges. Can I drop the charges if I wanted to? The identity theft charges, yes. But the fraud charges involving other victims, those belong to the state now. Even if you forgive your sister, she's still going to face consequences for deceiving other people and taking their money. That afternoon, I was restocking supplies in the supply closet at work when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Emma's lawyer. We need to discuss your sister's situation. Can you meet me at 4 p.m. at Starbucks on Main Street?" I stared at the message, my hands shaking slightly. Emma was already trying to manipulate the situation through her attorney, probably hoping to pressure me into changing my story or dropping the charges. But I'd come too far to back down now. I texted back, "I'll be there." The lawyer turned out to be a woman about my age named Jennifer Walsh, impeccably dressed in a designer suit and carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She'd chosen a corner table away from other customers, and she stood up to shake my hand when I arrived. "Ashley, thank you for meeting with me. I represent your sister Emma in the matter of the charges you've filed against her. I assume Emma told you her version of events." She did, and I have to say, I think there are some misunderstandings that we can clear up without involving the criminal justice system. Jennifer opened her briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. "Your sister is prepared to make a substantial financial offer to compensate you for any distress this situation has caused." She slid a document across the table. It was a settlement agreement offering me $25,000 in exchange for dropping all charges against Emma and signing a non-disclosure agreement that would prevent me from ever publicly discussing her fraud schemes. Emma wants to pay me to stay quiet about her crimes? Emma wants to make amends for what she acknowledges was a serious error in judgment. She's also prepared to donate $50,000 to a legitimate children's charity of your choice as a gesture of good faith. I read through the settlement offer, noting that it required me to admit that I'd overreacted to a family disagreement, and that Emma had never intended to cause harm to anyone. It also included language stating that I would publicly support Emma's version of events if asked about the situation by law enforcement or media. "This is hush money," I said, sliding the document back across the table. "This is a family trying to resolve a dispute without destroying each other's lives," Jennifer replied smoothly. "Ashley, if this case goes to trial, it's going to be a media circus. Your childhood photos will be evidence in a criminal trial. Your family's private business will be dissected in court, and probably in the newspapers. Is that really what you want? I want Emma to stop defrauding people. She's already taken down all the fake profiles and suspended the fundraising activities. The harm, such as it was, has already stopped. What about the people she's already defrauded? What about Marcus and all the other men she's been manipulating?" Jennifer leaned forward, her expression becoming more serious. "Ashley, you should know that Emma's prepared to testify that you were aware of her online activities and approved of them. She has text messages between you two that could be interpreted as you giving permission for her to use your photos." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What text messages?" Jennifer pulled out her phone and scrolled to what looked like screenshots of text conversations. "Here's one from 6 months ago, where Emma sent you a photo of yourself as a baby, and you responded with heart emojis, and so cute. Here's another where she mentioned her online dating activities, and you said good luck finding someone nice." I stared at the screenshots, recognizing the conversations, but seeing how they could be twisted to look like approval of Emma's schemes. In reality, I'd thought she was just reminiscing about old photos and casually mentioning that she was dating online. I'd had no idea she was using my baby pictures as part of an elaborate fraud. Those conversations were taken completely out of context. Context is a matter of interpretation, Ashley. A jury might see them as evidence that you knew what your sister was doing and supported it until you decided you wanted a cut of the profits. That's ridiculous. Is it? You filed charges right after Emma refused to include you in her business ventures. The timeline suggests you were motivated by greed rather than justice. I realized that Emma and her lawyer had crafted a narrative that painted me as a greedy sister who'd tried to blackmail Emma for money and gone to the police when she refused to pay. They were going to argue that I'd been complicit in the fraud from the beginning and only became a victim when I didn't get my share of the profits. "I'm not signing this," I said, standing up to leave. "Ashley, wait. Let me be very clear about what happens if you don't take this settlement. Emma will fight these charges vigorously. She'll drag your name through the mud, claiming you were her accomplice. She'll say you helped her create the fake profiles and that you're only turning on her now because you're jealous of her success. No one will believe that, won't they? You're the younger sister who struggled financially while Emma has thrived professionally. You work in the lobby of the same company, where Emma has an executive position. The narrative of sibling rivalry and jealousy will be very compelling to a jury." Jennifer packed her documents back into her briefcase with deliberate precision. "Think about what this trial will do to your mother, Ashley. Think about what it will do to your family's reputation in this small town. Think about whether sending your sister to prison is really worth destroying everything you've all built together." As I walked back to my car, I felt the familiar weight of family guilt settling over my shoulders. Jennifer Walsh was a skilled manipulator, almost as good as Emma herself. She'd managed to make me feel like I was the one tearing the family apart, like I was choosing revenge over reconciliation. But then I thought about Marcus, about the kindness in his eyes when he'd talked about wanting to be a father figure to Emma's fictional daughter. I thought about the women in the support groups who'd welcomed Emma into their circle of trust. I thought about all the strangers who donated money to help a child who didn't exist. Emma had hurt real people with her lies, and she was still trying to avoid consequences by manipulating me and threatening our family's reputation. She'd had every opportunity to stop her fraud when I first confronted her, but instead, she'd tried to recruit me as an accomplice. Even now, facing criminal charges, she was more concerned with protecting herself than with the harm she'd caused to others. I drove home knowing that Emma's lawyer would probably call Detective Chen tomorrow, trying to discredit my testimony and plant doubt about my motivations. But I also knew that the evidence spoke for itself. Emma's fraud was too extensive, too calculated, and too harmful to be dismissed as a family disagreement or a moment of poor judgment. That evening, Marcus called with more disturbing news. "Ashley, I've been monitoring Emma's online activity since we reported her. She's not as reformed as her lawyer claimed. She shut down the original profiles, but she's created new ones using different photos." "New photos of me? No, these look like stock photos or maybe pictures she's stolen from other people's social media accounts. She's still running the single mother scam, just with different faces." The revelation stunned me. Even while under police investigation, even while negotiating through her lawyer for a settlement, Emma was continuing to defraud people. She hadn't learned anything from being caught. She'd just gotten more careful about covering her tracks. "Marcus, you have to report this to Detective Chen immediately." "Already done. I sent her screenshots of the new profiles 20 minutes ago." "Ashley, your sister has a serious problem. This isn't just greed or poor judgment. This is compulsive criminal behavior." I thought about Emma's pristine apartment, her successful career, her apparent confidence and social skills. To the outside world, she looked like a woman who had everything together. But underneath that polished exterior was someone who compulsively lied and manipulated others for profit and entertainment. "There's something else," Marcus continued. "I've been in touch with some of the other men Emma was talking to. We're organizing, comparing notes, documenting the different stories she told each of us. Ashley, the scope of her lies is staggering. She created different backstories for different platforms, different versions of her daughter's personality and history, depending on what she thought each man wanted to hear." "How many men are we talking about?" "So far, I've connected with 8 other guys who were actively communicating with Emma, and they're helping me reach out to others. Some of these men sent her thousands of dollars over the course of several months. One guy was planning to propose to her, Ashley. He bought an engagement ring and was going to ask her to marry him at what he thought was going to be his first meeting with her daughter." The cruelty of Emma's deception took my breath away. She'd been playing with people's deepest emotions, their desire for love and family, their instinct to help children in need. She'd taken their generosity and hope and turned it into profit, all while convincing herself she was providing inspiration and community. "We're all going to testify against her if this goes to trial," Marcus said. "Jennifer Walsh can try to paint you as a jealous sister, but she can't explain away 8 independent victims who were all deceived in exactly the same way." For the first time since I'd filed the police report, I felt genuinely hopeful that Emma would face real consequences for her actions. Her lawyer's threats and settlement offers couldn't make the evidence disappear or transform fraud into a family disagreement. As I prepared for bed that night, I realized that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new attempts by Emma and her lawyer to manipulate me into backing down. But I also knew that I'd found my strength. I wasn't the same person who'd discovered that stolen dating profile 2 weeks ago. I wasn't going to be guilted or threatened into protecting someone who'd chosen to hurt innocent people for her own gain. Emma had taught me something valuable about family loyalty. Real loyalty isn't about protecting someone from the consequences of their actions. It's about holding them accountable when they harm others. The sister I'd grown up with, the one who'd braided my hair and helped with homework, she would have wanted me to stop her from becoming the person she'd turned into. I was going to honor that sister by making sure Emma couldn't hurt anyone else. The call came at 6 in the morning, jolting me awake from the first decent sleep I'd had in weeks. Detective Chen's voice was crisp and professional, but I could hear the satisfaction underneath. "Ashley, we've got her. Emma's been arrested on multiple counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and running a fraudulent charity scheme. The warrant was executed at her apartment an hour ago." I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. "She's actually in jail?" "She's being processed right now. Her lawyer is probably arranging bail as we speak, but Ashley, we found evidence that goes far beyond what you initially reported. Emma's been running this operation on a massive scale." Detective Chen explained that Emma's apartment had yielded a treasure trove of evidence, multiple phones with different dating apps, detailed notebooks tracking her various personas and the men she was manipulating, spreadsheets calculating her monthly fraud income, and most damning of all, a folder labeled Family Photos, containing hundreds of pictures of me from infancy through college that she'd been systematically mining for content. "She had photos of you that even you probably don't remember," Detective Chen said. "Birthday parties, family vacations, school events, casual snapshots. She's been building this fake motherhood narrative for years, Ashley. This wasn't a recent decision, it was a long-term project." The detective's words hit me like a physical blow. Emma hadn't just stolen my baby photos on impulse. She'd been planning this deception for years, carefully curating my childhood memories and deciding which ones would be most profitable for her schemes. Every family gathering, every photo Mom had shared on social media, every innocent snapshot had been potential ammunition in Emma's fraud arsenal. "There's more," Detective Chen continued. "We found evidence that Emma's been running similar scams using other people's photos too. She had folders labeled with different women's names, containing photos she'd apparently stolen from their social media accounts. You weren't her only victim, Ashley. You were just her most convenient one, because she had unlimited access to your childhood photos through family connections." I felt sick imagining other women discovering their photos being used to catfish strangers, other families being violated the way mine had been. Emma hadn't just betrayed me, she'd made a career out of stealing identities and exploiting people's desire to help children and families. What happens now? Now we build the case for trial. Emma's lawyer will try to get the charges reduced or dismissed. But with the evidence we've collected and the number of victims willing to testify, that's not likely to happen. Ashley, you should prepare yourself for Emma to escalate her attempts to discredit you. Desperate people do desperate things. Detective Chen was right. Within hours of Emma's arrest, my phone started ringing with calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Reporters who'd somehow gotten wind of the story, bloggers who followed true crime cases, even a few of Emma's fraud victims who'd found my contact information and wanted to share their experiences. But the call that shattered me came from my mother at noon. "Ashley, how could you let this happen?" Mom's voice was raw from crying. "Emma's been arrested." She spent the night in jail like a common criminal. The neighbors are talking. People at church are asking questions. You've destroyed our family's reputation for what? Some old baby pictures? Mom, Emma stole thousands of dollars from innocent people. She's your sister. You were supposed to protect her, not throw her to the wolves. I raised you girls to stick together no matter what. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar weight of family guilt, but this time it felt different. This time I recognized it as manipulation rather than obligation. You also raised us to be honest and kind to other people. Emma hasn't been either of those things. Don't you dare lecture me about how I raised you, Mom snapped. Emma made some mistakes, but she didn't deserve to be humiliated like this. She didn't deserve to have her own sister turn against her. She made choices, Mom. Criminal choices that hurt real people who were just trying to help someone they thought needed it. And now she's going to lose her job, probably go to prison, have a criminal record for the rest of her life. Was it worth that, Ashley? Was your pride worth destroying Emma's future? I thought about Marcus, about the engagement ring he'd bought for a woman who didn't exist. I thought about the single mothers in support groups who'd welcomed Emma and shared their real struggles with someone who was performing an elaborate lie. I thought about the strangers who donated money they probably couldn't afford to help a child who was actually me, 26 years ago. It wasn't about pride, Mom. It was about stopping Emma from hurting more people. People you don't even know. Strangers matter more to you than your own family? The accusations stung, because part of me did feel guilty for choosing justice for Emma's victims over protecting my sister from consequences. But a larger part of me knew that real family love sometimes means refusing to enable destructive behavior. Emma stopped being family the moment she threatened to frame me as her accomplice, I said quietly. Family doesn't destroy each other to avoid taking responsibility for their own actions. Mom hung up on me again, and I knew she wouldn't forgive me anytime soon. In her mind, I was the daughter who'd chosen outsiders over blood, who'd prioritized strangers over family loyalty. She couldn't see that I was trying to save Emma from herself, even if Emma couldn't be saved. That afternoon, Sarah showed up at my apartment with takeout Chinese food and a bottle of wine. She took one look at my tear-stained face and pulled me into a hug. I saw the news coverage, she said, settling us both on my couch with containers of lo mein and sweet and sour chicken. How are you holding up? I feel like I've blown up my entire family over baby photos, I admitted, stabbing at my food without really eating it. Mom won't speak to me. Emma's probably going to prison, and half the town thinks I'm either a hero or a vindictive sister depending on which version of the story they've heard. Ashley, you did the right thing. Emma wasn't going to stop on her own. She was getting more elaborate, more confident, hurting more people every day. I know that logically, but emotionally I feel like I've destroyed everything. Sarah poured us both wine and settled back against the couch cushions. Can I tell you something I've never told you before? About Emma? I looked up, surprised by the serious tone in Sarah's voice. Remember in high school when I was dating Tommy Morrison? We broke up junior year, and I never told you why because Emma asked me not to. Emma asked you not to tell me why you broke up with your boyfriend? Emma told Tommy that I was cheating on him with his best friend Jake. She showed him fake text messages that she'd created using some app, made it look like Jake and I had been having an affair for months. Tommy broke up with me without even giving me a chance to explain. I stared at my best friend, trying to process what she was telling me. Emma broke up your relationship with fake evidence? She admitted it to me years later, said she'd done it because she thought Tommy was wrong for me and I deserved better. But, Ashley, the way she did it, the planning that went into creating those fake texts, the casual way she destroyed my relationship for what she decided was my own good, it was exactly the same behavior she's showing now. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because she was your sister, and I didn't want to cause problems in your family. But now I'm wondering how many other people Emma's manipulated over the years, how many relationships she's interfered with or destroyed because she thought she knew better. Sarah's revelation cast Emma's current crimes in a different light. This wasn't a recent descent into fraud, it was the escalation of a pattern that had been developing for years. Emma had always been manipulative, always willing to deceive people if she thought the ends justified the means, always convinced that her judgment was superior to everyone else's. I keep thinking about all the times Emma gave me advice about relationships or career decisions, I said. How much of that was genuine concern, and how much was her trying to control my life the way she controlled Tommy and your relationship? Probably both, Sarah said gently. I think Emma genuinely cares about you, but she cares about being right and being in control more than she cares about your autonomy or happiness. We spent the evening going through our shared history with Emma, identifying moments that had seemed like big sister protectiveness at the time but looked more like manipulation in hindsight. Emma had always positioned herself as the wise older sister who knew what was best for everyone, but she'd also consistently undermined people's relationships and decisions when they didn't align with her preferences. You know what this means, don't you? Sarah said as we finished the bottle of wine. Emma's going to try to manipulate the legal system the same way she's manipulated everything else in her life. She's going to play the victim, claim she was just trying to help people, make herself the hero of this story. Sarah was right. Over the next few days, local news coverage of Emma's arrest began to shift in her favor. Her lawyer had clearly been working the media, providing carefully crafted statements that painted Emma as a misguided woman who'd made mistakes while trying to inspire struggling single mothers. The financial fraud was downplayed as, quote, gifts between consenting adults, and the identity theft was described as a, quote, family disagreement that had been blown out of proportion. Emma herself gave an interview to the local newspaper, speaking tearfully about how she'd never intended to hurt anyone and had been trying to create hope for women who were struggling with parenthood and dating. She claimed that her blog had helped hundreds of women feel less alone, and that she planned to donate all the money she'd received to legitimate children's charities. I made mistakes in how I went about it, Emma said in the interview, but my heart was always in the right place. I wanted to show women that single motherhood didn't have to mean giving up on love or dreams. I never thought my little sister would try to destroy me for trying to help people. The article included a photo of Emma looking devastated and vulnerable, accompanied by quotes from some of her blog followers defending her and expressing shock that someone would report family to the police over what they saw as a minor deception. The comment section was brutal, with about half the readers supporting Emma and the other half calling her a criminal who deserved prison. Reading that interview made me angrier than I'd been since discovering the original dating profile. Emma was still lying, still manipulating, still playing the victim even after being caught red-handed in multiple felonies. She was trying to turn public opinion against me by painting herself as a misunderstood philanthropist and me as a jealous sister who'd betrayed family for attention. But Emma's media strategy backfired in ways she hadn't anticipated. Marcus and several other fraud victims read the interview and were infuriated by Emma's claims that she'd never intended to hurt anyone. They reached out to the same newspaper, providing detailed accounts of how Emma had manipulated them emotionally and financially, how she'd created elaborate lies about medical emergencies and family crises to extract money from them. The newspaper ran a follow-up article titled, "The Other Side of the Story, Alleged Fraud Victims Speak Out." Marcus was quoted extensively, describing the fake birthday party, the non-existent medical expenses, and the months of emotional manipulation he'd endured. Other men shared similar stories of being deceived about Emma's financial situation and her fictional daughter's needs. Emma didn't just lie about having a child, Marcus told the reporter. She created an entire false reality designed to make us feel responsible for her financial well-being. She exploited our desire to help a struggling family, and she did it with calculated precision. This wasn't a mistake or poor judgment, this was predatory behavior. The follow-up article shifted public opinion dramatically. Readers who'd initially sympathized with Emma began to understand the scope and cruelty of her deceptions. The comments section filled with people sharing their own experiences of being catfished or financially manipulated, and expressing support for the victims who'd been brave enough to come forward. Detective Chen called me after the second article was published. Emma's media strategy just helped our case tremendously. Her lawyer probably told her to stay quiet, but she couldn't resist trying to control the narrative. Now we have her on record making false statements about her motivations, and claiming she never intended to defraud anyone, despite clear evidence to the contrary. What happens next? Emma's arraignment is scheduled for next week. Her lawyer will probably try to negotiate a plea deal to avoid trial. But given the amount of money involved and the number of victims, the prosecutor isn't likely to be generous. Ashley, you should prepare yourself for Emma to make one last attempt to get you to change your testimony. Detective Chen was right again. The day before Emma's arraignment, Jennifer Walsh called and asked to meet me at the same Starbucks where she'd offered me the settlement. This time, she looked less polished, more desperate, like someone whose carefully laid legal strategy was falling apart. Ashley, the media coverage has made this case much more complicated than it needed to be, Jennifer said, settling across from me with a coffee that she didn't seem interested in drinking. My client is facing potentially serious prison time because of the public attention this has received. Your client is facing prison time because she committed serious crimes. Emma's prepared to make significant restitution to everyone who gave her money. She's also willing to perform community service and undergo counseling. But the prosecutor is pushing for jail time because this has become a high-profile case. Jennifer leaned forward, her expression becoming more intense. Ashley, you have the power to influence the prosecutor's decision. If you are willing to speak on Emma's behalf, to emphasize that this started as a family dispute that got out of hand, it could make the difference between Emma getting probation and Emma going to prison. You want me to lie for her. I want you to emphasize the aspects of this case that show Emma as someone who made poor decisions rather than someone who's a career criminal. She's your sister, Ashley. She raised you, protected you, loved you. Doesn't that count for something? I thought about the Emma who'd braided my hair and taught me to drive, but I also thought about the Emma who'd threatened to frame me as her accomplice and continued running fraud schemes even while under investigation. Emma had every opportunity to stop when I first confronted her. Instead, she tried to recruit me into her criminal enterprise. She made her choices, Jennifer. Now she has to live with the consequences. Jennifer's professional facade finally cracked. Do you understand what prison will do to someone like Emma? She's not built for that kind of environment. She could be seriously hurt, or worse. Then maybe she should have thought about that before she decided to steal identities and defraud innocent people for over a year. I left that meeting knowing that Emma's legal team was out of options. They couldn't make the evidence disappear, they couldn't discredit the multiple victims who were willing to testify, and they couldn't convince me to lie for Emma to reduce her sentence. For the first time since this nightmare began, Emma would have to face the consequences of her actions without being able to manipulate or charm her way out of them. The next morning, I woke up feeling something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Peace. Not happiness, not relief, but a quiet certainty that I'd done everything I could to protect both Emma's victims and Emma herself from her own destructive behavior. Whether Emma learned from this experience or not was beyond my control, but at least she wouldn't be able to hurt anyone else while she was facing the legal consequences of her choices. As I got ready for work, I realized that the hardest part wasn't behind me yet. The trial was still coming. Emma would probably continue trying to manipulate me and our family, and the relationship between me and Mom might never recover. But I'd found something valuable in this terrible experience, the knowledge that I could choose justice over family loyalty when they conflicted, and that I could live with the consequences of that choice. Emma had taught me what real strength looked like, even if that wasn't what she'd intended. Real strength wasn't manipulating people or avoiding consequences. It was doing the right thing, even when it cost you everything you thought you wanted to protect. 6 months later, I stood outside the Millbrook courthouse watching Emma being led away in handcuffs. She'd been sentenced to 18 months in federal prison and ordered to pay full restitution to her victims. The judge had been particularly harsh about the charity fraud, calling it, quote, a calculated exploitation of public compassion for personal gain. Emma had looked at me only once during the sentencing hearing, and the expression on her face wasn't anger or sadness. It was confusion, like she genuinely couldn't understand how things had gotten to this point. Even after months of legal proceedings, multiple victim testimonies, and overwhelming evidence of her crimes, Emma still seemed to believe she was the victim of a misunderstanding rather than the architect of an elaborate fraud scheme. Marcus walked up beside me as Emma's transport van pulled away. How are you feeling? Empty, mostly. I keep waiting to feel vindicated or relieved, but mostly I just feel sad. That's because you're a good person who never wanted to hurt your sister, even when she was hurting other people. Marcus had become an unexpected friend throughout this ordeal. We'd bonded over our shared experience of Emma's manipulation, but more than that, we'd connected over our mutual belief that people deserved honesty in relationships, even when the truth was complicated or painful. "Any word from your mom?" Marcus asked as we walked toward the parking lot. I shook my head. "She still thinks I destroyed the family for no good reason. She visited Emma in jail every week leading up to the trial, but she hasn't spoken to me since the arrest. That might change when she has time to process everything that came out during the trial. Or it might not. Mom spent 30 years seeing Emma as the perfect daughter. It's easier to blame me for revealing Emma's crimes than to accept that Emma isn't who she thought she was." The trial had indeed revealed the true scope of Emma's deceptions. Beyond the identity theft and fraud I'd originally reported, investigators had uncovered evidence that Emma had been catfishing people for nearly 3 years. She'd stolen photos from dozens of women's social media accounts, created multiple fake personas, and bilked victims out of over $40,000 total. The most disturbing revelation was that Emma had been attending grief counseling groups, pretending to be a widow whose husband had died in a car accident, leaving her to raise their young daughter alone. She'd been getting free therapy and emotional support from genuinely grieving people by performing elaborate lies about loss and trauma she'd never experienced. "I keep thinking about all those people in the grief counseling sessions," I told Marcus as we reached our cars. "They opened their hearts to someone they thought understood their pain, and she was just practicing her act on them. Emma's going to have a lot of time in prison to think about the people she hurt. Maybe she'll finally understand the damage she caused." I wasn't as optimistic as Marcus. Even during the trial, Emma had maintained that her intentions were good, that she'd been trying to inspire hope and create connections between lonely people. Her lawyer had argued for leniency based on Emma's lack of previous criminal history and her stated desire to help others, but the judge had seen through the manipulation. "The defendant has shown no genuine remorse for her actions," Judge Harrison had said during sentencing. "Instead, she has consistently attempted to portray herself as a misunderstood benefactor, rather than acknowledging the real harm she caused to victims who trusted her with their money, their emotions, and their most vulnerable moments." As I drove home from the courthouse, I thought about the conversation I'd had with Detective Chen earlier that week. Emma's case had sparked a broader investigation into online fraud and identity theft, leading to new protocols for verifying charitable fundraising claims and dating profile authenticity. My sister's crimes had inadvertently helped protect future victims of similar schemes. That evening, I was organizing the box of legal documents I'd accumulated over the past 6 months when I found the envelope Marcus had given me on the day we first met. Inside was the stuffed elephant he'd bought for Emma's fictional daughter's birthday party, the party that had never existed for the child who was actually me 26 years ago. I held the elephant for a long time, thinking about the kindness that had motivated Marcus to buy a gift for a child he'd never met, and the cruelty Emma had shown in exploiting that kindness for financial gain. The elephant represented everything that was wrong with Emma's worldview. She saw other people's compassion as weakness to be exploited rather than strength to be honored. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The caller ID showed my mother's number, the first time she'd called me since Emma's arrest. "Ashley?" Mom's voice was small, tired. "I just got back from visiting Emma. She asked me to call you." "What did she want?" "She wanted me to tell you that she forgives you for testifying against her." The audacity of Emma's message left me speechless. Even from prison, she was still trying to manipulate the narrative, still positioning herself as the magnanimous victim rather than accepting responsibility for her choices. "Mom, I don't need Emma's forgiveness. I need her to understand that she hurt innocent people and that actions have consequences." There was a long pause before Mom spoke again. "Ashley, I've been thinking about everything that came out during the trial. About the grief counseling groups and the charity fraud, and all those men she lied to. I don't understand how Emma became someone who could do those things. Maybe she was always capable of it, and we just never saw it before. Or maybe we saw it and made excuses for it because she was family." Mom's admission surprised me. For months, She'd insisted that Emma was fundamentally good, that her crimes were aberrations or misunderstandings. Hearing her acknowledge that Emma might have deep-seated character flaws felt like a small victory. "I'm not ready to forgive you yet," Mom continued. "Part of me still wishes you'd handled this differently, that you'd found a way to stop Emma without destroying her life. But Ashley, I watched her in that courtroom, and she still doesn't think she did anything wrong. She's angry that she got caught, not sorry that she hurt people. I never wanted to destroy Emma's life, Mom. I wanted to stop her from destroying other people's lives. I know that now, and I know that what you did took courage. I just wish it hadn't been necessary." After we hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment thinking about the price of doing the right thing. I'd lost my sister, damaged my relationship with my mother, and been forced to confront the fact that someone I'd loved and trusted for 26 years was capable of systematic cruelty and manipulation. But I'd also gained something valuable. I'd learned that I could stand up for strangers when their well-being conflicted with family loyalty. I discovered that I was stronger than I'd known, that I could endure guilt and isolation and family pressure when I believed in the rightness of my cause. 3 weeks later, I received a letter from Emma in prison. She wrote about the harsh conditions, the unfriendly inmates, the terrible food. She complained about being misunderstood by the guards and mistreated by the system. But nowhere in the 3-page letter did she mention Marcus, or the grief counseling victims, or the single mothers who'd trusted her fake blog, or the strangers who donated money for my non-existent childhood trauma. I read the letter once and then threw it away. Emma was still the same person who'd stolen my baby photos and turned my childhood memories into props for financial manipulation. Prison hadn't changed her fundamental inability to see other people as anything more than sources of attention, money, or sympathy. But Emma's crimes had changed me. I'd started volunteering with a local organization that helped fraud victims navigate the legal system and recover from financial scams. I'd learned that empathy could be a superpower when directed toward people who genuinely needed help, rather than people who exploited that empathy for personal gain. 6 months after Emma's sentencing, Marcus asked me out on a real date. Not as fellow victims of my sister's fraud, but as two people who'd found something genuine in the aftermath of elaborate deceptions. We went to dinner at a small Italian restaurant where nobody knew our story, where we could just be Ashley and Marcus, rather than the sister who'd turned in her criminal sibling and the man who'd been catfished with stolen baby photos. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked over dessert. Turning Emma in, I mean. I thought about the question seriously before answering. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that Emma chose to hurt people, rather than getting help for whatever made her think fraud was acceptable. But I don't regret stopping her. "Good," Marcus said, reaching across the table to take my hand, "because the world needs more people like you. People who choose protecting strangers over protecting family secrets." As we walked to our cars after dinner, I realized that Emma had inadvertently given me something valuable. By stealing my childhood photos, she'd forced me to reclaim my own story, to decide who I wanted to be when family loyalty and moral obligation conflicted. She'd taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their destructive behavior, even when that refusal costs you everything you thought you wanted to preserve. Emma would be eligible for parole in 12 months. I didn't know if she'd learned anything from her time in prison, if she'd developed genuine remorse for the pain she'd caused, or if she'd simply gotten better at hiding her manipulative tendencies. But I knew that whatever version of Emma emerged from prison, I'd be ready for her. Because the girl who'd once let family guilt manipulate her into silence was gone. In her place was a woman who'd learned that real family love sometimes looks like accountability, that genuine strength comes from protecting the vulnerable rather than exploiting them, and that the truth is worth defending even when it destroys everything you thought you knew about the people you love. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.